Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today, I'm joined by a very important person in the fintech scene. He's actually done a lot. He's a top voice in the fintech scene, and I'm very happy to host you today, Huy.
Thank you very much, Oro. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be on the podcast and to be on Digital Tomorrow. And we've had the chance to work together over the last few years. So very, very happy to be here and discuss about all those different topics around fintech and more.
Yes, actually, as you mentioned now, Huy, we've been collaborating for the past few years via some courses at CFTE, and then I had the pleasure as well of hosting a Traman, I think it was around 3 years ago, to discuss other topics. So, I mean, I know that many of my viewers and listeners must know already about CFTE, but before talking about your background and about your book, I wanted to ask you if you could please let my listeners know a bit more about CFTE. What do you do? What is it exactly, in case they don't know, in case they are interested in your courses?
Yeah, of course. So CFT is a global education platform in finance and technology. We were first started in London, then very quickly we expanded into other countries, Singapore, the Middle East, Hong Kong also, and a lot of other countries. And the objective of CFT is very simple. In a world which is driven by technology, every single person should have a good knowledge of technology to do really well in their job, and especially in financial services. So the objective of CFT is about democratizing the knowledge of technology, especially for those in financial services. We started mainly to work with financial institutions, so a lot of the tier one financial institutions around the world, for them to train their employees. Then after that, we expanded into more than that. So also working directly with governments, central banks, startups, technology companies, really what we would call the financial system at large. So CFT today is pretty much in a lot of countries around the world. I'm currently here in Abu Dhabi, in our office in Abu Dhabi. We have more than 1,000 experts teaching on our platform, and that's really the core of CFT. Those people who are really, really good, who are building the future and the present of financial services, and who are teaching it back to the ecosystem. So people like you, for example, Oreo, well, I remember a few years ago, it was quite early, but when you started to build all those courses on CBDCs and CBDCs in China, and more and more, this is really about this, having people who are at the top of their game and who teach it back to the rest of the industry.
Mhm. No, and I can vouch for everything you said, because aside from the quality of your courses, aside from that, you are actually bridging the gap between traditional finance and new technologies, and you're attracting a lot of different students from very different backgrounds, because I had this experience myself when teaching those courses on CBDCs, or when teaching the digital assets program more recently. Um, Being reached out on LinkedIn or via email by people who told me they did the course, people with very different backgrounds. It could be either C-suite level from a big bank, or even students. So you can see this being put into practice. This idea of bridging this gap, of expanding, of sharing knowledge in these areas.
Yeah, that's true because we're really in a world where sometimes, and especially in finance, we tend to think in terms of silos.
Mhm.
And you are doing a specific activity in a specific types of organization, but the reality is that the world is really open for financial services. And so I think that's one of the wealth of CFT, which is being able to have on the same course someone who would be a regulator or a supervisor, for example, and a fintech entrepreneur,
Mhm.
or someone who works in Web3, or a student. As you said, we also have some students on our courses, and I think that's really something that we really enjoy because as finance is being built and transformed through technology, the reality is that there's not a single person who knows everything. It's really about how do we get as many diverse views as possible to be able to build something which is sustainable and solid.
No, I agree. And before moving forward, I wanted to ask you as well about your background, because I think that in order to fully understand CFTE, you need to understand as well your background, because you started right in traditional finance, but you ended up being one of the world's top voices, same as Traman, in fintech. So how did you like end up here? If you could please share this with my audience, because it's a very interesting journey.
So before CFT, I used to be in banking. So that's true. I used to be at Citi, and I used to run a group at Citi. So I was a managing director at Citi. That was my day job. I also had a night job, and my night job was in fintech across a few different things. One of them was with the fintech startup ecosystem in Hong Kong, actually. So one of the founding partner of Supercharger, that became the largest fintech accelerator in Asia,
Yes.
but also teaching. And I was the first fintech resident expert at Oxford, where I co-created the Oxford FinTech course. I also co-created the Hong Kong University FinTech MOOC. So that was all really good, but not everybody can afford Oxford. And really, that's the foundation and the starting point of CFT, which is that this knowledge is really, really important for everyone, whether you can afford or not, those big universities. And CFT was really about that, democratizing knowledge to make sure that every single person, wherever they are around the world, could have access to very, very good knowledge. But actually, I don't know if you know, but I wasn't born as a banker. So before banking, actually, I was an entrepreneur. So long, long time
I
ago.
didn't know that.
Uh, yeah, so after graduation,
Hmm.
I was actually an entrepreneur and I was a CEO of a UKB. And UKB was LinkedIn, but 5 years before LinkedIn. So totally wrong timing. But my background actually is entrepreneurship and tech entrepreneurship. And that's the reason why I was really interested in fintech and technology and finance, because finance I really love. I really love my experience in banking. And of course, the technology side came from the fact that I used to be an entrepreneur before.
Hmm. I see. That's very interesting, and thank you for sharing. And there is one more question I would like to ask you before jumping into the main topic, which is your book. And this question is something I usually ask to most of my guests, especially those working in fintech, right? This question is, what do you think the future of finance looks like, or finance in general, or fintech? Is there anything that you think we should take into consideration, like for this next
Mm.
year or 5 years to come? Anything that you think is really important for people to know or to discuss?
That's a really good question because in 2025, we could look back at 2015, so 10 years ago. 10 years ago, so a bit more than that, that's when I started my blog called Disruptive Finance.
Hmm.
And at that time, so it was more than 10 years ago, my view was really simple, which was, finance, will be transformed by technology, like a lot of other sectors. And we're moving into a world of digital finance. And digital finance will have, some of the incumbents that will be digital and will transform themselves. But the reality is that there will be a lot of new entrants also. So, and that led, to fintech, etc. If we think in terms of transformation, I love business models and strategies. So I tend to use a lot of frameworks. If you look in terms of transformation, we knew there would be two types of transformation. One, which is what I call cheaper, better, faster. Doing the same thing, but by leveraging technology, you can do it more efficiently and cheaper. This is Revolut, TransferWise, all those kind of companies. This has been a very, very large part of fintech over the last 10 years. There was the other part also, which is different. So not trying to compete with an existing solution, but doing something totally different. That was typically, for example, Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, always harder to predict, but could have definitely huge impact at the level of an industry, which is what we saw because Bitcoin led to things which we couldn't think of, which was CBDCs or stable coins or no tokenized deposits, etc. So going forward, what is likely to happen? I think what is likely to happen is that we will continue to see those two different trends. Cheaper, better, faster will continue. So digital banking, digital payments, digital finance, this is likely to accelerate, in my opinion, because the reality is that all those, let's call that traditional fintech, the likes of the Revolut, the Nubank, etc., are likely to accelerate now that they have the customer base, the banking license, the understanding of financial services. They will just accelerate by leveraging more on new technologies such as AI, agentic AI, generative AI. So it will accelerate. We will see more of that. What we will see also, but which is very, very hard to predict, is different. What kind of real disruptions are we likely to see? And my view is that we are likely to see two types of real disruptions. One coming from AI, which we're really, really far from being able to imagine today, because what will hyper-personalization bring to us? What kind of new products, what kind of new... So we're likely to see much more coming from that side. And we are likely to see also different coming from what I would call the tokenization trend, tokenization of digital assets, the fact that now we can put the whole infrastructure on finance on blockchain. So what I can predict with quite a bit of certainty is that digital finance will continue and will accelerate a lot. So all the products and services that we have, cheaper, faster, better user experience, some new entrants, yes, we will see that. Some things that I cannot predict is what will happen, mainly because of AI and blockchain and digital assets.
True, true, true. No, I think everything you said is very interesting, even though, as you said, now it's kind of difficult to make certain predictions, especially considering how fast everything is going with digital assets and mostly AI. And actually, this brings us to the main topic we are going to discuss today, which is artificial intelligence, and more specifically, your book. In case my viewers and listeners don't know, I'm sure they do, but still, you published a book a couple of months ago, or I think it was in November, called The AI-fication of Jobs, Preparing Ourselves for the Future of Work, a book which is available, I know, in many bookshops. I saw it on Amazon as well. So it's available, I would say, globally. And well, first of all, can you please let my listeners know a bit about this book, what's it all about, and what made you decide to write it, and especially now?
Yeah, definitely. So the AI-fication of jobs is about thinking and anticipating the impact of AI on jobs. And the reason why I wrote this book is that CFTE is an education platform. To properly teach people, you need to have an understanding of where the world is going, what kind of skills are required in order to properly teach those skills. And what we have seen, especially since the advent of generative AI and ChatGPT, we have seen the world change really, really quickly in terms of jobs and work. And from what I saw and all the different research that we had, we didn't have a good idea of what the future of jobs and work was. And so because of that, we couldn't properly prepare people with the proper skills. And so that's why I spent time trying to understand much more, in much more detail, the trends that would be important. And it took me 9 months actually to work on this book and to release it. And the book is very different from what you would have seen. So there have been, for example, a lot of research on the future of jobs and work, for example, from the IMF or the World Bank, Goldman Sachs, etc. What you tend to see is a lot of either macro numbers, 300 million jobs will be impacted.
Yeah,
Very, very micro numbers, which is if I take the job of a research analyst, 85% of the job could be impacted by AI. So it is a job which is highly likely to be impacted by AI. But I think it's not sufficient. I think it's not sufficient for us to have a real understanding of what is really going to happen. And in order to understand this, I took a very different approach, which is instead of taking either a macro approach or a micro approach, I decided to revert the perspective. And instead of looking at it from the point of view of us, humans, I looked at it from the point of view of the disruptor, artificial intelligence. Because we have a disruptor, which is AI, which is entering into an existing system where you do have no incumbents, no legacy systems, etc., which is jobs and work. And so when you revert this perspective, then it becomes much clearer in terms of understanding the trends and what is likely to happen. So that's really the genesis of the book.
Mm-hmm. And who would you say is the target audience of this book? Like when you wrote it, you were thinking like about the general audience, or is there anyone more like anyone you think it would be more suitable for this to read this book rather than others?
Yeah. So there are three audiences actually. So I really wrote the book for three types of audiences. The first audience is policymakers,
Mhm.
those who can do something at the level of society. The second one is senior leadership, leaders from the private sector, those who can do something at the level of their organization. And the third one is individuals, the people like you and me, who can do something at the level of their own lives, their own professional lives. And the reason why I wanted to have this audience is that the conclusion of the book is that the future is not written yet for jobs. The future is not written. However, there's a choice for us to do. If we don't do anything, we're likely to move into a world where some people will do really, really well, but a majority of people will not be able to keep up with AI and will fall behind. On the other hand, if we do something at the level of society, the level of organizations, at our own level, actually, there's a brighter future. And this brighter future is what I call a future of collective abundance. Because the reality is that now we have moved into a world of abundance. In the same way as with electricity, we had an abundance of energy. With AI, today we have an abundance of cognitive power. So a lot of the issues that we face, a lot of the problems that we cannot solve yet, climate change, for example, or hunger, or water, or education, now we have much, much more resources in terms of cognitive power to solve them. The only question is, will it be collective abundance, or will it just be abundance for a few people? And that's the reason why I wrote this book for those three audiences, because we need to make this decision. If we knew that, if we do not act today, if we are, this is what I would call, the price of passivity, if we do nothing, then having AI as a disruptor, we know that a few will do really, really well. And we have examples around the world, and some people do really well, but a majority of people will fall behind. So that's really up to us. And that's why, those three audiences were those I had in mind.
I like this idea you said now about this collective abundance. So what can we do? Because you said if we don't do anything, it's going to remain distorted, not to the extent that some will benefit, but most people will not. And you said we need to do something. So what can we do in that sense?
Yeah. So what is likely to happen? I think what is likely to happen first, if you think of people like you and me, we're likely to see three really important trends happening at the same time. One, what I call the emergence of supercharged professionals. Those people who will do really, really well because they combine their domain expertise with leveraging technology, who can be, 5 times, 10 times more efficient, faster, better than who they are at the moment. The second trend is mass displacement. Now that AI is starting to be better than the average of us, then some people will not be able to compete with AI. They will be more expensive, they will be slower. The employers will decide to use AI instead. They will fall behind. Mass displacement is the second trend. And the third trend is the creative disruptors. There will be a few people around the world, just a few, not a lot, no, just a few people who will have an outsized impact on all of us. We can think of people like, of course, Sam Altman and his team at OpenAI. If you think about it, it's just a small team, impacted the whole world. But there are others. Demis Hassabis, for example, the CEO of Google DeepMind, he received the Nobel Prize, but not for AI. He received the Nobel Prize for chemistry because it totally changed basically the way of predicting no 3D, no protein, no folding, for example. For chemistry, by doing this, it totally revolutionized chemistry, biology, a lot of other sectors. So a few people can totally revolutionize whole industries or the whole world. So if you think about it, what should we do? I think first, at our level as individuals, we need to be supercharged. We cannot fall into the mass displacement side, individually. It doesn't help anyone. Of course, it doesn't help you individually, but it doesn't help society if people fall into mass displacement. So I think individually, it's about, how can I make sure that I am supercharged and can leverage, AI the most so I can be much better. So I think that's one. After that, there's perhaps not the most important, it's at the level of society in itself, the policymakers. The first step, I think, is for policymakers to understand what is happening, which I think there's a deficit, there's a gap of knowledge at the moment, at the level of policymakers, at the level of those who are at the highest level of society, which is understandable, of course. You're at that level, your objective is not to do AI. The reality is that we cannot afford, like what we saw in social media, for 10 years or 15 years for society to realize what has happened. We need the policymakers now to be at the same level of discussion as the AI companies. That means a lot of the knowledge gap needs to be filled now. And that really means education for policymakers, for them to understand what is happening. Once they have done that, then that's about making sure that we can discuss with those AI companies, with the level of society at that level. And then finally, for those who are at leadership level in organizations, in the private sector, there are very low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruit is to improve your productivity, is to improve your profitability by, instead of paying an employee $50,000, paying an AI $500. That's a very low-hanging fruit. That's a temptation which a lot of people will have. I think it's about realizing that it's not necessarily a long-term choice that you can make, because the reality is that once you have squeezed the most that you could do, what's the purpose of your company? So that's really about having a strategic thinking about what you can do with AI and making sure that you keep people at the center. I think that's really about this. Keeping people at the center, as an individual policymaker or organization, I think is really the starting point. And that's the reason why I wrote the book, because the book is really accessible for people to understand what is likely to happen and to make sure that in whatever they do, whatever they think, they keep people at the center. Because if we don't, then we know what our future will be.
Mhm. I think what you said now about policymakers is actually very interesting, because, well, as someone like me who has a background in law, I mean, I can tell you that usually the law and anything related to policymaking tends to be slower than new technologies. I mean, that's normal. I'm not saying this is a critique, it's how it works. New technologies, they are born fast, they spread fast. I mean, AI, ChatGPT a couple of years ago took the world by storm, but then it takes a few years for policymakers, for regulators to catch up to the speed of the technology and come up with the adequate regulations. And I think it's how it works. It's always been like that, but it can kind of be a problem in a sense, because AI is advancing very fast. So we need to make sure that the regulations and everything is up to date. And at the same time, we need to make sure not only that people are protected, I think, but at the same time, we need to make sure that by creating these regulations, innovation is not hindered in any extent. At least this is what I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're really right, on the point, which is that things are moving very fast. If we think about it just a bit more, it's been what, 2 years since ChatGPT.
Mhm.
If you think about it, we're starting to talk already about artificial general intelligence. It's only been 2 years since ChatGPT. 3 years ago, people were predicting that AGI would happen in 15, 20, 50 years. 2 years later, some are already saying that it might happen this year or next year. So the acceleration is incredible, which means that we do not have the luxury of time. We cannot wait 10 years basically to be ready for these kind of discussions. We have to be ready for this discussion now. And the reality is that the investment in terms of knowledge doesn't require, today, you do not need a PhD from MIT to talk about AI. In 2 or 3 days, you could have enough knowledge to be able to really have a good understanding of what's happening and to make sure that you understand what are the likely trends.
Mhm. And you mentioned before the idea of education. So education aside, how do you think we can prepare ourselves for for this future of work that will be heavily influenced by AI, like aside from educating, of course, in this area?
Yeah, so that really depends on, again, at which level you're putting yourselves at. I'll give you an example. At the level of a policymaker, when we think of AI, we tend to think of working in AI and not of working with AI. For example, the consultation paper from the UK government. So the UK government has said we want to be a leading nation in AI, which is, of course, a very commendable objective. However, if you look at all the different recommendations in this paper, it's about how can we have more data scientists? How can we have more data centers? How can we invest more in startups? It's all really good, but it's really working in AI, which is perhaps like 2% of the people. But working with AI is everybody else. It's all of us. It's like 98% of the population will be impacted by AI. And so the first thing is to make sure that we always have this lens, which is we tend to think of AI of it's very technical. It's about the data scientists. It's about the technologies. But as I've said for a long time, AI is too important to be left to the data scientist. AI will impact all of us. So I think the first thing is to change our lens and make sure that when we think about AI, we really think of everyone and not just the data scientist or the technology side. So I think that's the first thing which we can all have. The second thing, in terms of individually, so as you mentioned, education, of course, is really, really important. But I think even more than education, now we have a chance. The chance is that if you or me, we wanted to be in AI 10 years ago, then yeah, we needed perhaps to have a PhD from MIT, or we needed to have a lot of skills which are very, let's call that hardcore analytical skills, programming skills, statistical skills. Today, everybody can use ChatGPT. But everybody, can go actually much further than ChatGPT. So I would say, perhaps, one advice for anyone who's listening: if you do not have a paid subscription to ChatGPT, just take it. It's $20 per month. I have no vested interest in ChatGPT,
I know it.
but $20 per month. With $20 per month, you will be able, for example, to create your custom GPT. If you don't know what is a custom GPT, you will see this is just amazing. Not only you will be able to do a lot of interesting things, but you will understand how an AI works, how an AI thinks. You will be able to use some of the tasks of ChatGPT and start to create some kind of automation. So I think education definitely really, really important, but also start using it, because the barrier to entry is extremely low. But for those who do not use it, the world is moving very, very quickly, and you don't want to fall behind and have the train leaving the platform.
Mhm. No, actually, it's amazing to see how it's evolved in a few years, and ChatGPT is of course fantastic, but it's not only ChatGPT, right? I mean, there are like so many programs, so many apps out there allowing you to create like either slides, presentations within a few seconds, to create text out of nowhere, image. I mean, it's evolving so fast, and I mean, it's good to see this evolution. But as you said before, you need to be able to know how to leverage that. And I wanted to ask you as well, because we know that AI is a technology, right? And it's the same technology, but at the same time, perhaps some areas of the world, some regions are more prepared to embrace this change. Do you think that
Yeah.
there is, or there are areas, regions which seem to be more prepared to embrace AI in general and what it will imply than others? Or you think that it's pretty much the same all over the world?
So if you look in terms of trends, of course, the mega power by far is the US. That's where everything is happening. I would say 90% of the investment, of the innovation, of the ecosystem is in the US today. The reality is that a lot is happening also in China. The only difference is that the US is exporting it to the rest of the world, whereas China keeps it much more domestic. However, so this is really the macro trend. However, I think at the level of an individual, that's really different. The level of an individual today, the world is your oyster. Anyone, almost anywhere in the world could have access to the most powerful technology ever, which wasn't the case 15 years, 20 years ago. You remember, so I used to be an entrepreneur. 20 years ago, if you wanted to be an entrepreneur, you had to, your first $1 million would have to be about buying Sun Microsystem computers or Oracle database or etc. It was really, really, really expensive. Then we've had cloud that made it so much cheaper. But today, for free, you can have access to the same technology, pretty much that anybody uses in the world. So I think the world has become much, much more open, which means that there's much more opportunities also. I think anyone, anywhere around the world now can learn, upskill, get skills that almost nobody else has for almost nothing, which is amazing.
No, no, that's true because I mean there are like so many ways to learn more about AI. I mean, there are like
Yeah.
more specialized courses like the ones you mentioned before at CFTE, but then there are free courses. I mean, it's so like easy, to find ways to learn more about AI, and so easy as well to put those into practice. Because unlike other areas like let's say I don't know digital assets, which I think are more niche in the sense that
Yeah.
perhaps not everyone might be interested in that, but then AI, I think it's affecting everyone in every possible way. It doesn't matter whether you are in finance or you work as a journalist. I mean, it's affecting, it's taking by storm the whole world. And related to that, I wanted to ask you, um, is there, I know that as individuals it affects everyone, but do you think there is going to be any industry in which the effect of AI will be more well, it will be easier to see, to notice?
So in the same way as the AI-fication of jobs will impact all jobs, I think AI-fication will impact all industries. However, I think there are some industries where we're already starting to see the impact. For example, healthcare. If you look at what is being done in healthcare today, if you think about it, how did we get to a COVID vaccine so quickly? Then actually it is thanks to AI. If you look at the companies like Moderna, uh, that got the first vaccine out, they were very, very AI orientated. If you think of, I was talking about Google DeepMind and AlphaFold, which received the, I don't know if you know, but AlphaFold was the first one to predict the structure of the COVID protein, actually, a few months before a human team. And that was through generative AI, through LLMs. So AI has already revolutionized healthcare, and we will continue to see that, which is, I think, really, really good news. Now, a lot of other ones, the weather, now you can start predicting like a week in advance, for weather, etc. So we'll see it everywhere. Actually, in financial services at the moment, we haven't seen these big disruptions yet. We've pretty much been at the level of what I call cheaper, better, faster.
Mhm.
You can have AI for customer service, which is great. You can have AI a bit for credit scoring, but it hasn't been totally disruptive or revolutionary yet. I hope and I think that we will see some real disruption in finance over the next few years. Of course, it is a heavily regulated industry, but in the same way as healthcare is a very heavily regulated industry. But I think we will see actually much, much more in finance over the next few years. Yeah.
Yes, so I'm happy, I would say, that you mentioned AI in healthcare, not because I have any kind of you know um, financial interest in that or anything, but because sometimes whenever I talk to people either in conferences or via LinkedIn, they are always excited about how AI is affecting, disrupting the financial services industry. And I think, of course, the potential is huge as well. But as you said, I agree with you that perhaps we've seen like more effects on, for example, healthcare. I was recently writing a paper about how AI was used for, or is being used for healthcare. I was focusing at that time in Hong Kong and China, but still it could be applied pretty much
Yeah.
anywhere. And it's fascinating when it comes to vaccine production, to even I was reading about a team of researchers in Hong Kong. I don't remember if it was Hong Kong U or Chinese University, but still, in any case, I remember reading about this team which created this AI solution which could be applied um, to ophthalmology and which help to detect glaucomas more efficiently even than human doctors. I mean, I know we are still
Yeah.
talking about maybe something very new, and in the end we don't know whether it's going to gain traction or not, but the idea is that I think that in healthcare there is like a long way to run, and also in finance, of course, but as you said before, the financial
Mhm.
sector is also heavily regulated, so it may take a little bit longer. But if we are seeing these effects on healthcare and other industries, for sure it's going to pretty much affect all industries.
Yeah, and the reality is that there will be, a lot of innovations which we can't really predict because of the supercharged professionals. In each industry, you will have a lot of people who will combine that domain experience with technology, and because they know that domain really well, this is where they can do amazing things. And again, this is, either cheaper, better, faster, or different. So either things that we already do, which will be supercharged and can do so much, better, through, AI. For example, that's what you mentioned, being able, to detect, glaucoma, even better than a human, ophthalmologist. Or it could be different. The reality is that, perhaps you don't have, to detect it in that way. You could find, a lot of different ways, to detect, glaucoma, or not even, detect it, but perhaps not even cure it, before it happens. So this is where it's just amazing, and being able, to see those innovations. Now you have innovations that can come from anyone. It can come from anyone who has this domain experience. Before, innovation was really, really concentrated into the hands of a few. Would be more, the very, very, few innovators, because they are able, to have the resources, the means, the capital, etc., to innovate. Today, the reality is that almost anyone can innovate as long as they know their domain. So this makes it, I think, much bigger in terms of, the whole innovation space.
Mhm. And it really sounds fascinating. And I wanted to ask you like one final question regarding this topic. I seem to remember that you mentioned that AI governance requires stakeholder collaboration and informed decisions. I think this is something you mentioned in your book. So how can this be achieved?
So how can this be achieved? I think it can be achieved through the book. That was the objective of the book. The book is really about having people, who, this is what we've done through the book launch in Singapore, in London, in Abu Dhabi, through, some of the podcasts, for example, like, on the Digital Tomorrow. It's There's a lot of people who resonate with that message. I think a lot of us understand that there will be a big impact on AI, and we need to do something. But who is the we? It's not pretty much anyone. And so the reality is that, this message, can be conveyed to pretty much, everyone. It could be, policymakers, industry leaders, and as humans, as individuals, I think we all resonate with this. What is hard, however, is that it's very confusing. There's a lot of confusion. What is really happening? Will it be good? Will it be bad? Well, will it be like before with, the electricity, where we had some jobs that disappeared, some new jobs? It's really, really confusing. So what the book does is that it simplifies all of this thinking into a structured framework. So it's so much easier to think about it. Once we have this foundation, then we can talk about what are the possible, solutions. How can we leverage, AI, etc. So that was the objective of the book, which is to reduce confusion so that all of us at all level can start properly thinking and discussing about it. So the book is really a starting point for discussion. If we are, all part of the discussion, AI, technologies, non-AI technologies, people who don't even use a computer, I think if we are all part of the discussion, then that will make basically the outcome so much better than just having AI driving the discussion.
Mhm. And before wrapping this episode up, are there any final remarks you would like to make? Any message you would like to convey to my listeners or viewers about your book or about whatever you want?
Yes, yes, yes. I think so. For the last 10 years or even more, I've always said it's the most exciting time to be in financial services. And every year I keep saying it, because the reality is that it's always a very, very exciting time. And now it's a very exciting time because we know that big changes are happening. and that all of us, any of us, can be part of those changes. The barrier to entry is really low, and the only skills that you need is, let's call that curiosity,
Mhm.
curiosity, because so many things are happening, and the ability to learn very quickly. If you have those skills, I think it's really exciting time to be. So that's really my message, which is that AI can be really frightening, which is true, because it has the ability to disrupt, our lives, to disrupt our jobs. But let's not be, on the side, and let's not just see, all those changes happening. Let's be part of those changes so that we can influence it in a positive way. So if we all do this, then actually AI can be extremely positive for all of us and for society. So that's really my message. And I think for all of us, make sure that you're part of the change and make sure that you are also part of broadening those change so that all of us can be a part of this.
That's a very good message indeed. I mean, being part of the trend, not being left behind, etc. I
Yeah.
think it's a very good message, and I hope my listeners and viewers listen to this message and act accordingly, because as you said before, we are living fascinating times, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the more fascinating it is, the faster it changes, and the faster it changes, the more the easier it could be not it could be to be left behind if you are not like catching up or constantly or always trying to learn, to be curious, as you said before, this idea of curiosity. So I think it's a very good message, and well, unfortunately, we are reaching the end, sorry, of our episode. I would like to thank you, Huy, for your time and for sharing with my listeners all these ideas, talking about CFT, your background, finance in general, fintech, and more specifically about your book, which I'm sure it's very interesting, and I'm sure my listeners will enjoy reading, because I strongly recommend them to do so.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Aurel, for the very kind invitation. It's been a real pleasure to be on a digital tomorrow. Thanks a lot also for being part of the CFT ecosystem and also teaching and sharing your knowledge to our learners, which is always amazing. And for all of us, all of you, who listen to this, thanks a lot for listening. And I wish you the best in this amazing new world of AI.
Thank you very much, Huy, and well, to all my listeners, thank you for listening to this episode, and please stay tuned for the next ones. See you all.
Thank you. Bye.